What's up, it's ENDYMION, and lately there's been some nonsense surrounding the upcoming Souls-like action RPG Black Myth Wukong, which looks awesome. I honestly can't wait to play this game when it drops. And it turns out, according to rumors, that Black Myth Wukong's director is out here whipping his meat out and rejecting the woke weirdos. And if these rumors are true, and Wukong keeps this same energy, we're about to see a mega hit on our hands, fellas. Beyond this, there's other games being slammed for the opposite reasons, like Assassin's Creed Shadows and much more. But let's get into this. So this all started when a user on Twitter named Pirate_Nation decided to tweet something about Wukong. According to the translations provided from Chinese social media platform Weibo, which is basically Twitter but the Chinese version, a Chinese journalist has published a story regarding Black Myth Wukong and states that the backlash the game is receiving in the West is due to their rejection of Western values. The Chinese post stated that because Wukong's studio, which is called Game Science, is rejecting these woke consulting agencies and refusing to work with them, Western websites are attempting to run hit pieces against Game Science to derail their success in the West. This coincides with an article that came out in 2023 by IGN from two writers who have both gone and protected their Twitter accounts since this article has gotten attention, and it's titled, "How Black Myth Wukong's Developer's History of Sexism is Complicating Its Journey to the West." According to what IGN says here, Game Science is a sexist, bigoted game developer that harasses and belittles women within the games industry. They said, and I quote, "For an indie studio that has only released mobile titles within the country, this widespread acclaim over Black Myth Wukong is a largely unprecedented feat, particularly for a game that has not been released yet, but beneath the luster of this Souls-like is a studio plagued by claims of sexism." Several posts have surfaced from Chinese social media site Weibo written by individuals from the studio that contain multiple references to genitalia and sexual innuendos. These have provoked a backlash among some in the game's community, many of whom are women. This was coupled by recruitment posters by the studio produced in 2015, which featured images and headlines that point to a culture of ingrained sexism in game science. IGN spoke to several women familiar with gaming culture as well as the games and technology industry in China, many of whom requested to be anonymous for fear of backlash from fans of game science and the broader games community. In the eyes of many female players, Game Science has a notably negative reputation, said Jen, a Chinese game designer who's now based outside of China. "I admire their dedication and work. I had high expectations for their game until I came across their misogynistic remarks around 2021, which was reported in the news." Founded in 2014, Game Science is a Hangzhou-based studio formed initially by 7 ex-Tencent game employees. During their time in Tencent Games, they worked on a free-to-play MMORPG called Ashura Online. Black Myth Wukong can be said to be the spiritual successor of this MMO, with both games based on the Chinese literary classic Journey to the West. A year later, Feng Ji, one of the co-founders of Game Science, left to form Game Science along with his colleagues. After releasing a slew of mobile titles, Game Science decided to focus on the development of Black Myth Wukong in 2017. Feng in particular has an outsized presence within the games industry, with a penchant for sharing introspective insights on game development peppered with crude metaphors and boorish innuendos. In 2007, he penned a lengthy article titled "Who Has Murdered Our Game?" when he delved into the difficulties of game development in China. Feng compared failed projects to stillborn babies, given that many games had to cease development despite being worked on for a year or so. He then brought up this analogy. Is it because the sperm isn't virile enough? Is the pregnancy too short? Is the baby lacking nutrition? Are the doctors in charge of cesarean sections lowly skilled? Why can't we produce a healthy child or product? To many who were familiar with Feng's mannerisms, these were just the harmless quirks of a game developer who, as vulgar as he may seem, is steadfast about his vision for game making. Several fans have excused his behavior, with them chalking this up to a straight-up talking passion for game making. There's no need to debate, many literary giants also use foul language, let's just experience the work ourselves. A single beauty can cover up all the ugliness, so let's just wait for the results. But I will support it because of their courage and that they were able to put so much culture and history into the game, reads one response written in Japanese to a video discussing the controversy, end quote. So this Feng guy who's spearheading Wukong is clearly a very eccentric and weird kind of dude. which doesn't really surprise me in the slightest, to be real with you. When it comes to game developers that are considered visionaries like your Kojimas or Miyazakis, all of these individuals have their own weird mannerisms or styles. Obviously, comparing Hidetaka Miyazaki, who made the Soulsborne genre, is not someone known for saying crude things. But the truth is that behind closed doors, whether we want to admit it or not, everyone says things or has quirks that are weird in some way. It's just obvious here this Fang individual is just very open about his opinions and then what he also thinks of others. Which personally, I think is fine. His statement in terms of comparing a cancelled game or struggling game to say a baby that dies in childbirth is weird, yes. But remember again, he's not someone that is born in the West. His mannerisms and how he conveys things likely make much more sense in his native tongue, and for a website like IGN, which apparently champions diversity, they do seem to be one of many websites that are constantly trying to break down the Asian game developer side of the world. This is mostly because in terms of the West versus East, Asian games are still way less riddled with identity politics and woke nonsense compared to their Western counterparts.
If you're a creative working in AAA, which I did for many, many years, put this stuff up to your higher-ups, and if they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want.
There's an obvious agenda here being pushed by IGN and other sites to attack and destroy game science's image, but why? Well, in that same tweet by Pirate Nation, which was then made into its own article by NicheGamer.com, it stated that Black Myth Wukong's dev studio is being unfairly targeted because they rejected Sweet Baby Inc.'s advances when it came to working together. According to the Weibo post, that same Chinese journalist, who remains unnamed, says in their post that Sweet Baby Inc. themselves targeted Black Myth Wukong specifically, and they wanted to help game science's devs in making their game more acceptable and appealing to Western audiences. Except Game Science obviously declined because Sweet Baby was asking for $7 million freaking dollars to consult on their new game, which is insane to me. Not only that the price is just way too high, I mean this is an indie game studio by the way, imagine what SBI is charging these bigger companies, it's insane. But if you're a game studio or publisher paying anywhere in the $1 million range to have Sweet Baby Inc. come in and ruin your game and turn it into a woke nuclear wasteland, you're an idiot. I don't care how long you've worked in games, what position you hold, or anything like that. If anyone watching this works in games and is debating on spending any kind of money to have SBI work on their game, you're a moron and your game deserves to fail. I can't believe that's a real price point. Imagine paying someone millions to ruin your life's work and sink your entire studio. Just insane. This reminds me of what Thomas Mahler said in the past. He's the CEO of Moon Studios. They made Ori and the Blind Forest and they're currently working on No Rest for the Wicked. He also came under fire for saying Moon Studios refuses to work with consultants on their games. Which of course in response, Thomas Mahler got criticism from game people, but he explained at length that the reason why he doesn't believe in consulting agencies is because they never actually face the choices of their own decisions. This is how consulting agencies pretty much always go down. A game studio or publisher hire Sweet Baby Inc. or whatever other ones that are out there. You pay them millions, they tell you what to change about your game, now your product has no edge to it at all. Everything has been sanded off, the character's world story, all of it is just worse now. SBI collects their paycheck and then they leave you to work. Your game then comes out, nobody likes it because everything about it is now ass, and your game reviews poorly, it sells nothing, boom, you fail, and you close down. Yet Sweet Baby and people like them just keep on existing because whether you succeed or fail, SBI doesn't lose any money either way. Because they already got your money when you paid them. So if your company fails, like Thomas Mahler said, these consulting agencies never actually have to face the errors of their own decisions. Instead, other people, usually in the hundreds, have to lose their livelihoods and have their lives uprooted. And Sweet Baby just continues their crusade of ruining everything as they keep going onward. The Weibo Chinese post also points out that Sweet Baby has deliberately ruined games like God of War Ragnarok and Spider-Man 2 in the past, which I agree on both examples. I think the previous games in both of those franchises were much better than their sequels, at least from a character and story standpoint anyways. So Fang of Game Science rejecting Sweet Baby Inc. because he knows that if he were to let them in, Black Myth Wukong would be irreversibly damaged by their involvement was a really smart decision. They would also likely push game science to include things like people of color within the game and gender swap many characters into women for diversity reasons. Essentially, if you want your game to be made by committee and be made for the modern audience, you call someone like Sweet Baby Inc. And I could give plenty of examples of how games related to SBI have lost millions already, like Spider-Man 2, Suicide Squad, and entire studio closures aplenty as well. They don't call it the sweet baby kiss of death for nothing, dear viewer. These parasites are killing video games. And there's more versions of them that are popping up all the time, like Baby Ghost, Sugar Baby recently too, and even Hit Detection. All of these companies are in bed with one another, and they are siphoning the life force of video games in general to fill their pockets with money and ruin as many franchises as they possibly can. And we've seen also aplenty that games that do the best are the ones that reject these very consultants. Look at Hogwarts Legacy, Palworld, and so on. Black Myth Wukong is currently set up to be a massive hit for game science. I wouldn't be surprised if it breaks records across the board. But the reality is that its scores will likely be lower than originally intended, and it'll have nothing to do with the game's quality or anything like that. But instead, simply because Wukong doesn't bend the knee to woke identity politics. But we know bending the knee to DEI is never a good option either. Go look at Assassin's Creed Shadows. Recently, the game's director even stated they took literal emotional damage when Elon Musk denounced their game and called it crap. That game's director's name is Mark Alexis Coty, and he was speaking with Stephen Datillo of GameFile when he stated that Elon Musk broke him emotionally. He said, and I quote, "That tweet generated emotions that the first thing I wanted to do was go back on X that I had deleted and just tweet back. And I just took a step back. I have a mindfulness app on my phone, and I did a bit of mindfulness to try to explore the emotions that this tweet created. For me, Elon, it's sad. He's just feeding hatred. I had a lot of 3-word replies that came to mind. But attacking someone like Elon, I will not convince people about our point of view as a team. Yasuke is very grounded in the history of the franchise and how we make our choices. We've got a super mysterious historical character from which not much is known about, and for us, it was what we wanted in Assassin's Creed. What Elon says is not the game that we're building. People will have to play the game for themselves. And if within the first 11 minutes and 47 seconds they are not convinced of what we're doing, we can have the discussion. I was reviewing the game very recently and I was like, the answer is there. I just hope and wish that people can keep an open mind about this and see the game for what it is. It's an Assassin's Creed game, and I believe the best one we've ever built," end quote. Mark can think all he wants, the proof is that what his studio has presented thus far in terms of Shadows has been nothing but negative feedback. The game is racist. I mean, you're a fake black samurai who wanders Japan killing and looting Japanese people for their belongings as they just helplessly look onward. And the fact the game has Yasuke literally beheading people and crushing Japanese men's skulls like candy, it's ridiculous. Elon Musk is right though, that DEI does kill art, and I think this director knows deep down that Elon is right. I think what the director of Shadows was saying here within context is that the director is fighting with his own personal beliefs about the game. Because he likely knows that Yasuke was a terrible decision to add, but Ubisoft needed the ESG points. So he's spending the interview trying to convince others, but really himself, that he and his team made the right decision. But they clearly didn't. There's so many problems, by the way, being revealed about Shadows from especially Japanese players. Like how rice is growing when the sakura trees are in bloom, which means Ubisoft doesn't understand how seasons work in Japan. Not to mention the plentiful of amounts of Chinese architecture, and let's not forget the collector's edition box and statues, which have the wrong symbologies when it comes to clan banners and armor. Not to mention people have pointed out that the kanji on the collector's box is completely wrong and mistranslated, I'm not kidding. And of course the other fact that Shadows' main battle theme for Yasuke is a weird rap hip-hop take on Japanese music, which is just so goddamn racist and tone-deaf it's insane. I would show it to you, but I would get copyright striked unfortunately. But anyway, nothing is right here, and the game is not only a woke disaster, it's historically completely wrong down to its seasons, weather, architecture, history, all of it. I've never seen Ubisoft fumble an Assassin's Creed setting with this amount of bad translations than ever before. But at least Shadows had a Japanese consultant who clearly was well overpaid because they do not do their job if they couldn't even catch things like the wrong kanji on the collector's box. Like, come on, man. And this is the difference between a game that bends the knee and a game that refuses to, like Black Myth Wukong.
And so I want to put on that, like, very mercenary hat for a second and talk about the way that we decide how we're going to sell the art that we make and how we're going to approach the audiences that we make it for. Because I think so often when people like us get told, from higher ups or from society at large, this isn't what players want, it's not a conversation about content, it's a conversation about demographics. And I think that in our industry and in so many creative industries, if you want to look at film and television and any art form, we start treating our core demographics as a fixed and static value, something that does not want to change and something that is locked in place. So despite the changing face of audiences, despite the changing face of conferences like this one, we still look at our core demographics and say, okay, they're white, cis, hetero males. And we cater almost exclusively to them. And the problem is that we don't just cater to them here's something that we think you'll enjoy. We cater them the way that we cater to a picky baby. We feed them the same thing that we know that they love, and we keep on feeding it. We're like, here you go, you love it, eat this, eat this, eat this. So that then when they get anything else, they react as a picky baby would, which is be like, whoa, no, thank you. I do not want this. And we've actually done this so long that what we're doing is creating an entire nation of picky babies, and they make us scared to deviate from what we actually want to do, just in case these picky babies don't want to play our games.
Not to mention that Wukong has negative press aplenty for seemingly no reason it seems, yet AC Shadows has nothing but good publicity from the very same websites claiming that Fang of game science is sexist and so on. What we're witnessing here is clear media bias that is being created to shape narratives to fit their own agendas. This is why I do what I do, fellas, because if I don't speak out about this, places like IGN and more, they'll just get away with this. They genuinely think you're all stupid and you won't notice that any of this is happening. And you'll just open your wallets like good sheep and buy the slop because you don't want to be labeled racist, but I'm here to tell you that it's all BS. And you should never listen to what these websites are saying because their agendas are designed to divide and make things worse. The West hates how the East won't bend to their whims, and it's because the East keeps winning while they're losing millions. Take this article from a few days ago from Bounding titled, Vinland Saga editor says manga should not pander to Western audiences. I don't allow myself to be influenced by so-called political correctness abroad. These words come from the current editor-in-chief of Kodansha's Weekly Afternoon, a manga magazine, and the editor-in-chief's name is Akira Kanai. And he claims that the West's influences have zero power over what they do with their IPs and franchises. Manga Passion, a German news website, was interviewing Akira Kanai, and they asked him whether the audiences outside of Japan's influence what his editorial team does or the franchises within them do, and I quote, "No, not really. For example, there are various codes against the depiction of violence, against the depiction of nudity, whether male or female, or religious codes that I follow. However, I think that there are no fundamental differences in the population in terms of what they perceive as important, be it Japan, Germany, China, or South Korea, even if it is the case on a political level. I don't allow myself to be influenced by so-called political correctness abroad and design the works accordingly. I think that if it's interesting, it will usually be understood, regardless of whether you come from Africa, Chile, or Greenland. I've never made a big deal of it so far, but even if a work takes up a very Japanese theme, for example, or a German work, a German theme, a Chinese work, a Chinese theme, in the end, the root is the same, I think. Stopping a work because it deals with a problem that is too Japanese or specifically to do something that hardly ever happens. More specifically, I wonder if there is a difference in Japanese entertainment content between works that are internationally successful. Is it the works that focus more on the Japanese market or a global market? I don't think it's possible to create works that are exact in the middle, nor would such works really appeal anywhere. The mindset that Japanese publishers will get poorer and poorer if they don't expand overseas is pathetic and should be abandoned. Now that it is possible to read and draw manga abroad, I hope that the manga fan community itself will grow, no matter where they come from and no matter what religion they belong to. So when it comes to the question of whether I think globalization is important, I can say that it's much more fun this way." End quote. Kanai is absolutely right, and if we could just take his mindset when it comes to content moderation and apply that across literally everything, we'd be living in the most golden ages of right now for media across the board, really. Because he's right, you don't need to change what your product is to appeal to other audiences. What I find, and this is true of YouTube as well, is that the more you change yourself to fit something that you're already not comfortable with, the more inauthentic you'll be. It would make no sense for me to suddenly rebrand myself as a makeup channel or toy unboxing because that's not who I am. And I don't think changing who I am is going to appeal to people who wouldn't normally like me, because if I did that, then I wouldn't be me in the end. Which means ultimately, what's the point? It's the old saying of when you make something for everyone, you end up making something for no one. You can't realistically cater to every demographic. It's impossible. Life, business, art, whatever, it's like picking your stats or class in an RPG. You can't be a warrior, mage, thief, and a summoner all at once in a game like Final Fantasy Tactics, for example. You can mix things, sure, but you can't use all of the abilities at once. Instead, you have to choose which things you want to specialize in, and then you hone in on those and craft that character to fit that role perfectly. And that's the same thing when it comes to life. Some of us are warrior classes, some are mages, other red mages, or hunters, berserkers, ninjas, whatever. The point here is that you can't reasonably pander to everything equally without losing that authenticity in the process, and with Black Myth Wukong, they proved this. Instead of making their game for a modern audience, they're making their game unapologetically Chinese and doubling down on the mythology and style. And funnily enough, by catering to Chinese fans specifically, the game will find its own audience in the West that also likes that sort of stuff too. And in Assassin's Creed case, what they're doing is actually worse, because they've taken something that was one thing, a historical action series, and they turned it into a woke DI disaster that wants to cater to both Assassin's Creed fans and the sweet baby inks of the world too. Which just ends up making a game for neither really, because you're not giving each group what they want specifically. The same could be said about Star Wars. It was made primarily for boys, Disney turned it into a female brand, and now it's for nobody. And Akira Kanai is the mentality all of these people need pretty much. You reject whatever is trying to weasel its way in, and you stay true to yourself, and then you just push forward confidently. My content is not made for woke lunatics because I do not care for them. I don't want to cater to weirdos who think there's a billion genders because I don't care about that. I just stick to what I know and what I believe in, and I'm confident by doing it that I will find my own audience like yourself who's watching this right now. If we all cater to everyone's needs constantly, everything would just be a big gray bowl of mush with all the edges gone, no spice, no flavor, nothing. All because you don't want to offend anyone, and then you just end up with is just something that's made for nobody, and then you just fade into oblivion. If Black Myth Wukong wants to sell millions, they'll just keep pushing Sweet Baby Inc. away with all of their force. They should even make a post saying that they reject them. That'll honestly sell them thousands of copies, easily right there. In the end, the more we reject this nonsense, the better off we'll all be, and I truly do believe that. So please support the things that actually don't hate you, and keep giving the middle finger to these morons that clearly hate us for simply being who we are. Thank you for watching, subscribe, share, and like the video. Thanks to my patrons, and have a wonderful day. And I'll see you in the next one.